All right, so special factors, okay? The first special factor that we're going to talk about is a difference of two squares, okay? So the difference of two squares. Okay, the name is important because it tells you exactly what it's made up of. A difference means you're subtracting something. Two squares means that each term can be written as something squared, okay? So the idea is this. This is the way the formula is written out. They say a squared minus b squared is equal to a minus b times a plus b. That's your formula, okay? The point is to figure out how to write out a and b, okay? So this part right here and that part right there, you have to figure out how to square the term. Now, that may not make a lot of sense right now, but we'll do some examples so you can see how we do this, okay? But you have to figure out how to square that term. Whatever you use for a and b, you just place it into that formula, okay? So remember, a squared minus b squared is just a minus b times a plus b. Some people will use x squared minus y squared, whatever letters you want to use, it doesn't matter. So let's go right to the homework because there's not much more I can tell you about this formula. It's a formula, okay? So let's take a look at question number 1. Actually, let's do question number 2 first. That's going to be a little bit easier. Then we'll go to question number 1. So question number 2 is x squared minus 25. Okay? So x squared minus 25. So what I want you to do is we have to figure out how can I rewrite, let's say 25, we'll do the easy part first. How can I square something and get a 25? Okay, so this is going to be thinking about that number right there. What do I square to get a 25? A 5. So I'm going to write that right there. Okay? What do I square in order to get an x squared? Just an x. Now you see those things inside of those little parentheses? Those are my a's and b's. So all I'm going to do now, it's just automatically write x minus 5, x plus 5, and you're done. That's it. This problem is finished. It's very quick. That's why they call these special factors, because they have little tricks to them. And once you see these little tricks, then you can immediately factor. A student asked me before, could I do the x method with this? Yes, you could, but it's not necessary. Okay? When you notice that it's one of these types of problems, just use the formula they gave you. So for us, this would have been part D. Okay? Now let's look back at something like number 1. Sorry, I'm just looking at these other ones just to make sure. Yeah. So let's take a look at number 1. Okay? So 9x squared minus 4. So your job is to figure out what squared is 9x squared and what squared is 4. We'll start with just a number. What squared is a 4? 2, right? So let's put a 2 right there. And then the other side with the variables usually a little tougher. What squared becomes 9x squared? 3x. Thank you. So we got 3x. Now that I have that, I'm pretty much done. I just need to write that little pattern, right? So 3x minus 2, 3x plus 2. And that's it. I factored it. I'm done. Now, how could this become a little bit more difficult? Well, if they have a greatest common factor. So right now I'm going to show you one of those. So we've done an easy one like number 2. A kind of medium one like number 1. Okay. Notice question 3 should be relatively easy. Question 4, right now we're going to talk about something like this. Even 6 is a little bit on the hard side, but 5 is kind of like question 1. You can actually do these quickly. But let's talk about something like question number 4. So for question number 4, 18p squared minus 32. Okay? Now, if I were to do this right away, okay? If I do something squared minus something squared. By the way, don't write this down. Well, you can write it down, but don't write it down from this point on. Just hold on, okay? So I'm going to write some stuff. I'll use purple just to kind of show you like a different color. Don't write anything I write down in purple, okay? Not right now, okay? So I may not even write anything down, to be honest with you. What squared is 32? But 6 squared is what? 36, not 32. Is there a number that you can square that becomes a 32? No, there isn't, right? So wait a minute. Well, maybe the 18 side, 18p squared. What squared becomes 18p squared? Is there a value I can use for that? Like, no, right? There's nothing that I can square that becomes 18. So did I do something wrong? Not necessarily, okay? All I have to do right now is say, okay, can I factor something out of it? So from 18 and 32, I can take out a 2. So let's take out a 2. And what's left over is 9p squared minus 16. Okay? Now you guys see this part in here, this little squiggly line thing that I'm drawing out for you guys? I can write that using a difference of 2 squares. What squared, that we're going to deal with this one first, okay? What squared is 9p squared? 3p. Okay, so I'm going to put it right there. What squared is 16? 4. So here we go. My answer is going to be 3p minus 4, 3p plus 4, but in front, I got to put a 2 because I factored out the 2. Okay? So, why is this one considered like the most difficult type? Because you may have to factor before you can actually do the problem. Okay? Look at number 6. We're not going to do it because that leaves me with 3 problems for you guys to try. But look at number 6. Is there a number squared that'll give you 50r squared? No, right? There's no number I can square that gives me 50. The closest would be 7 squared, but that's 49. Okay? And there is no number squared that gives me 18. So what I'm going to have to do is ask myself, what can I take out from 50 and 18? Well, I'll tell you, you can take a 2 out. Okay? If you take out a 2, this becomes 25r squared minus 9. Now, is there something that I can square that gives me 25r squared? Yeah, 5r. Can I square something to give me a 9? Yeah, 3. So notice, I'll leave that there for you guys. For number 6, factor first, your greatest common factor, and then do this little trick of something squared minus something squared, okay? So this is called doing the difference of 2 squares, okay? This process that we did, notice the first problem we did, very quick, very simple, right? It was just break it down immediately and it worked. The second problem that we did, the only reason why people would consider it a little harder is because not only was there a variable, but there was a number in front of that variable. So you had to figure out, okay, a number and a variable that gets squared. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. And then we did number 4. And for number 4, we had to factor first. Then we could do the difference of 2 squares and write our answer. So we had to factor a GCF. That's why these are considered the tougher ones. But, I mean, they're not that bad. It's just an extra step. Okay? So you guys have 3 problems to do for homework. Notice, number 6, we already talked about, you're going to want to factor. Number 5, you're going to want to factor. Number 3, you don't need to. You can do that one right away. Okay? So you have 2 of them where you got to find the GCF first. One of them that's just automatically ready. You can just work on it from there. Okay? Now, let's look at the grouping stuff. Okay? So you guys have 4 problems based on grouping. So let me show you what you do on grouping. Let me go back to some notes here. You know what? I'll do it on the second page since this is where the assignment is. So factor by grouping. Okay, how do you do it? Number 1, use parentheses. Number 2, find the GCFs. Or actually not find, but factor the GCFs. Okay, that's pretty much the 2 steps you need to do. After that, you factor your commons. So let me put right here, factor the common factor. And again, I know sometimes the instructions don't make a lot of sense because you actually don't see it done. But I'll give you a quick representation of what this usually looks like. What you're supposed to do is put a parenthesis around the first 2 terms and a parenthesis around the last 2 terms. Then you're supposed to factor within those parentheses, okay, your GCF. And that's kind of hard to do here because we don't know what A, B, C, and D are, right? So I can't really show you much more than that. It's best to actually do a problem. But the first step is kind of what's there. You're going to want to put a parenthesis around. Now, let me just give you a quick hint here. Sometimes you may see a problem like this. Let's say that's a plus. You see that minus in the middle? If you ever see a problem like that, which I'm sure you'll see one, and you put your parenthesis around like that for the first one, when you do the parenthesis for the last 2 terms, you're going to have to change it to a minus. You're going to have to change the sign. Okay, it shouldn't be plus anymore. You want it to be a minus sign. Okay, so you could always like erase it, right? But I don't want to erase it right now because I want you to see in red, that's the way it used to look. The purple is the change, okay? So whenever there's a minus in the middle and you put parentheses, you have to change the sign in the second parenthesis, all right? That's one of the most important parts because or else you're not going to be able to factor. So let me show you what these problems look like. We'll go over 2 of them. I'll try to see if I can pick an easy one and a harder one. That way you can see both. So let me take a look at the problems here. So the easier ones would be things like 8, but it seems like you tend to have, yeah, so we'll do something like 8 and then we'll do something like 10. Okay? So here we go. Number 8. So let me write it out. V cubed plus 2v squared minus 2v minus 4. Okay? Now remember what I told you. You're going to want to put a parenthesis around the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So check it out. Parenthesis v cubed plus 2v squared minus a parenthesis 2v, I'm going to keep it green here, plus 4. So you notice how I changed the minus to a plus because there was a negative in the middle. Okay? Now I know you're looking at that and saying, well, this doesn't really look like something easy to factor. Well, let's try to factor, okay? Look at the first parenthesis. Okay, the v cubed plus 2v squared. What do those have in common? Just this one right here. What does that have in common? What do they share? V cubed and 2v squared. A v, right? How many v's do they have in common? One of them has 3 of them, one of them has 2, right? This one has 3 of them. This one has 2 of them. So how many do they have in common? They have 2, right? So I'm going to factor out a v squared. Okay? Now, what's left over is v plus 2 minus, what does 2v and 4 have in common? A 2. So let me take that out. 2. And inside what's left is a v plus 2. Now you notice how the factored thing, I wrote it in green? Okay, I did that on purpose because what I want you to notice is they both ended up with the same factor. See that v plus 2? Both of them have that v plus 2. That's what I call in step 3, factor the common factor. Okay, the factor that they have left over. So what you're going to do is you're going to write that common factor first. After that, what did I leave out? If the stuff that's not highlighted, what is it? V squared, negative 2, and I'm done. That's my problem right there. That's my answer. Okay? This is how you factor 4 terms. So v squared minus 2, v plus 2 is going to be a. Okay, so just to review, what you guys want to do when you're doing these problems is you're going to start off with your 4 terms. Okay? You're going to introduce the parentheses on the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Keep in mind that if there's a minus in the middle, you must switch the sign. If it's a plus, then just leave it alone. Okay, leave it whatever it is. Once you do that, factor whatever this parenthesis has in common. So we said v squared. Factor whatever this parenthesis has in common. So we said 2. When you factor it, you better get common factors, okay? In other words, if you don't have matching pieces like the ones I have highlighted, if they don't match, that means you did something wrong, okay? That's how you can tell if you're on the right track or if you completely messed up, okay? So this has to match, whatever it is. It has to match. Because once they match, you get this and you take it out. And then you look at what's left over, v squared minus 2, you just write it out. Okay, and that's it. That's your factored form for 4 terms. So let's try doing a harder one. Not that they're really that much harder, but it's the same idea. You just may have to factor more stuff out. Okay, so let's try this one right here. So I'm going to rewrite the problem first. So 4x, well, it's going to be a minus, but that's okay. I was going to try to do a plus, but this is okay. 6x squared minus 2x plus 3. Now let me give you like 15 seconds. Apply the parentheses to the first 2 and the last 2. And maybe you might have to make some changes on signs, but try to write it out. Right now I'm going to give you 15 seconds, and then I'll show you the next step, okay? So go ahead and try real quick. Write out your parenthesis representation. 10 more seconds. 5 more seconds. All right, let me write it out for you. This is the way I would do it. Parenthesis 4x cubed minus 6x squared, end parenthesis, minus, and now I notice there's a minus in the middle. That means I got to change the sign, so it's going to be 2x minus 3. So this is what it should look like. Okay? Notice The minus in the middle made me change the sign at the end. All right, so in the first parenthesis, we're going to factor out a 2x squared. Okay, what's left over if I factor out a 2x squared? Well, this will be 2x minus 3. Is there anything that I can factor from the second parenthesis? Do they have anything in common? So I'm seeing what some of you guys saying this with your heads, which is correct. I cannot factor anything from 2x minus 3. So in other words, in the front, there's like a phantom 1, okay? But all that's left here is a 2x minus 3. Like, you can't factor anything. 1 is the only thing you can factor. So let me highlight that just to kind of make a point that notice how they match, okay? Bless you. Notice how they match. So I'm going to get those matching things. I'm going to rewrite it here. 2x minus 3. And what's left over? All right, 2x squared minus 1. And as you can see, where is that? 2x squared minus 1, 2x plus 3. Or sorry, 2x minus 3. That's C. Okay? That's how you do factoring of quadrinomials. So right now I'll give you guys your homework for this.